Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy J Rock. Today I'm gonna be hitting you with a graphic novel haul. It's more like an omnibus haul. I kind of went crazy these last 2 weeks. Bought a bunch of omnibuses, and I know. I said I was selling a lot of my epic collections and omnibuses and so forth, and I was buying them digitally. As I bought a copy digitally, I sold my physical copy. I did that with the majority of my X-Men trade paperbacks, and I did that with a lot of my omnibuses, the ones that they had in, for example, if there was a Epic Collection Volume 1 and 2, and that material was covered in one omnibus, I will sell the omnibus and buy the two Epic Collections digitally. And in my mind, I'm like, well, it's the same material, right? So it's been replaced digitally. And I was slowly taking that route as I bought them. And so a lot of the X-Men books and the Amazing Spider-Man omnibuses, they go up in price over time, right? So I was like, at the prices that they're going for right now, I might as well sell them. Not only will I make some space, but I'll get some money, not only to buy stuff digitally, but for other things I need money for, right? I've got bills and so forth. So I decided to get rid of a lot of my X-Men omnibuses, and I kept a few. The ones I didn't have digital replacements for and whatnot, I kept. And so I told them I didn't regret selling them because, I sold them for a good price and so forth. A year or two later, they freaking reprint almost every single X-Men omnibus. That was crazy, yo. That was bonkers. Yeah. So needless to say, with all these announcements and so forth, I started doing a lot of pre-orders. In some cases, I even forgot I freaking pre-ordered the motherfuckers. So I'm on Insta Trade, waiting for the release at 12:30 or whatever, so I could catch a copy. The next thing you know, I get my copy and I get a extra copy. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot I already ordered this shit, right? That happened to me a few times, like once or twice. These things happen especially when things goes mayhem. That there are things like all kinds of stuff is coming out, and you're just ordering all kinds of shit. You lose track of what it is you're buying and not buying. That's not a good thing. That's kind of a sign that you're doing too much. You need to slow your roll. You're buying more than you should, or don't pre-order, or something's gotta change. Something, because you can't just forget about what you're buying and lose track of shit. That's a big sign right there. So I'll explain to this as I show the books. I'll get into these stories. Um, Also, I got a few fragrances because I collect fragrances. I'm not gonna get into that haul. I save that stuff for a separate channel that's for other hobbies, and maybe I should combine the two. But I am gonna show what I wore today. Just dropped a review of this on my other channel. Antonio Banderas Blue Seduction. This is a huge 200 ml bottle. 200 ml bottle. Your average fragrance bottle is 100 ml. So this is the size of two bottles, right? For 20 bucks. Check out fragrancenet.com or Fragrance Buy if you're interested in checking out fragrances. You usually get them like half off. They're kind of like your in-stock trades of colognes and perfumes, right? Anyways, this smells real good for those of you that want to just have something casually to go to work, go to hit the gym. It's a good one. This smells better than a lot of those expensive Gucci fragrances and Prada. This beats a lot of those. The problem with this is it only lasts about 2 hours, which explains why they give you such a big bottle. Because you're gonna have to spray way more times, and then 3 hours, 4 hours later, spray again. So you're gonna go through this bottle in the same amount of time as you would some of those other fragrances that are 80 bucks and what. In case you're curious what that fragrance smells like, it's melon and seawater, basically, right? So it's kind of like your typical aquatic fresh fragrance, fresh out the shower. Think your Axe shower gels type of smell, but this has this extra touch of it has a note of cappuccino, so it slightly makes it a little different. They add a little different. In case you're interested in checking that out, like I said, check out those websites. You get a great bang for your buck. You get fragrances at a real good deal. I would never buy that many fragrances at the mall and stuff because they're so expensive. But once I went on those websites and they're at a fraction of the cost, then I'm buying 3 or 4 a month. But back in the days, I bought 3 or 4 like in a year, right? So all right, guys, let's get into some of these books now. That's what we all came here for. And I'm just looking at this. I got a lot of freaking omnibuses, and I also got I noticed they're very Marvel heavy over DC. Also, because DC, when I first got into the game of collecting collected editions, DC wasn't dropping that many omnibuses. They were taking the route of absolute editions, which I wasn't down with because you get so much less material, right? They are bigger and so forth, which I also didn't like at the time because I'm like, then they don't even fit on my freaking shelf, right? Like the shelves I have, they're almost specifically meant, they're just a little bit taller than what an omnibus would be. So I don't want to have those big books unless it's a very specific artist like a Michael Turner or Jim Lee. It has to be somebody I really enjoy, maybe Sean Phillips. Those are some of my top artists right there. Then I would maybe buy an absolute size book. But for me, I like omnibuses, not because they're oversized, that's not that big a deal to me. It's more because you fit a lot of material in one book and it still stays moderately thin compared to getting 4 hardcovers, right? You'll fit it in one Omni. The omnibuses usually carry, at least Marvel, from what I've gathered, they usually carry 3 hardcovers in one omnibus. All right, the first one I got right here is Batgirl by Gail Simone. I read some of Gail Simone's Red Sonja. I think the first trade or the first 3 issues, and I thought it was solid. I really liked the writing on it. It was cool. And I read her Gen 13, and that was not good. That was really bad. So she's kind of hit and miss with me, but I hear good things about this. Plus, you get her whole run in the New 52 era right here. Here's a spine. So you get the whole run right here. Might have to throw the umbrella up on that fucking light because it's glaring way too much. So I'll get back to you right now. All right, through the new umbrella on there. I think it even got worse. Still see a lot of glare. But yeah, that's the cover. This is the back cover. This contains issues 0 to 34 of the main run. It's a lot of issues, plus 23.1 of Dark Knight, Valentine's Day Special, Annuals 1 and 2, and Batgirl Futures End. So it has quite a bit of material, about 40 issues. I believe it's like 1,000 pages. I think this is the size omnibuses should be, anywhere in between 800 pages and 1,000. I'm not a big fan of those books that are 1,400 pages. Those are almost always an automatic skip for me. That's way too much in one book. That should be 2 700-page books. And if they're 300, 400 pages and they call it an omnibus, that's fine. I don't care. I just look at it as a hardcover. But the price does matter. Like, yeah, charge me a hardcover price, right? Charge me $75, charge me $50, $25 for a 500-page book. But yeah, I'm excited to read this. I hear a lot of good things. I know some people they hated the idea of this. When it comes to comics, movies, you gotta let things play out, guys. Let me put this down. It's pretty heavy. And this run, for example, I heard a lot of people hated it because Batgirl, being Barbara Gordon, she was paralyzed at the time. And she had a new character named Oracle. And here she got her legs back and she's walking again, right? Because it's kind of, the New 52 is like a reboot, right? So fans hated that. They're like, oh, why does she have to be Batgirl again? Or we already have Batwoman. We don't need 2 Batwomen or Batgirls, right? Which, in my opinion, from what I have read, I feel like Batgirl's a lot cooler than Batwoman. But in Batwoman's defense, I don't know a lot about her. I really liked her on that Tinian Detective Comics run. Thought she was solid right there. That's really my main, that's really the most I know about her, is that and a few animated movies. Anyways, my point was, you have to let these things play out because now once the run was said and done, 35 issues being like 3 years worth of material, people love the run, right? They say, oh, Gail Simone's run is solid. So you gotta let these writers do their thing. Don't just immediately after 1 or 2 issues, oh, it's garbage, or let's see where it's going. Give it 8 issues or whatnot, right? Like me, I rarely buy singles of any of the current stuff nowadays. I wait for the trades, I wait for the hardcovers. So for the most part, I'm reading a good chunk, right? I'm reading 6 issues, I'm reading 10 issues. So I get to see now that you read a good amount of material, you give a more educated opinion on if you're liking the run or not. Do you want to buy the volume 2? So back in the days, you could buy 1 issue and get a full story and know if you like it or not. If you're feeling the style of these writers, what these writers doing, right? Now you have to give it at least 6 issues, at least a trade, to tell the same amount of story. Don't ever judge it by 1 or 2 issues. Oh, it's going nowhere. Like, you gotta give it the full 6 issues. And this Gail Simone run is a perfect example of that. I haven't read it myself, but just based on opinions of some people hated it, some people loved it, some people hated the idea, but once they started reading, they're like, hey, it's actually pretty good. So, but as fans, we spend money on this stuff. we're readers, so it's like when you buy tickets to a football game, a basketball game, you paid your hard-earned money, so you have the right to boo the player you don't like. You have the right to cheer the player you do like. That's opinionated. As long as it's about the material and not the other fan base or not the writers themselves, right? Let's keep it about the material, which a lot of times it spills over into that stuff, and unless it gets a little nasty. All right, so I'm drinking this White Claw seltzer. I try to stay current, like I try to stay current with what new omnibuses are out and whatnot. I try to stay current with the new drinks and whatnot. I was big into IPAs for a while, where beer kind of felt watered down to me already, and I was into the IPAs, but they pack a lot of calories. I still love them, but they do pack a lot of calories, and I'm trying to trying to live a little more healthy. So these are kind of lightweight, right? They're not too they don't have too many calories. They're not too heavy. They don't make you feel sluggish or whatnot the next day. They are kind of expensive though. These are kind of pricey, but this brand White Claw, to me, these are the best seltzers out there. And now that they're all the trend, they're all the buzz, right? In the bars and so forth is the seltzers. So Corona, but like all those big companies want to get in on the action, want to get some of that money, right? So now they make seltzers. I don't think they're nearly as good. For the same price, you get a can about twice the size of this one when you buy it from those brands, but they're not as good, but you do get more of it, a bigger portion. Um, so anyways, I'm not saying if you're going for flavor, go for these. If you're just trying to drink more, you go for those other ones. These are pretty good. My point about that was I was drinking this one and I logged on to DoorDash. I was like, you know what? I'm going to order a little six pack. And when I hopped on there right now, it said, hey, congratulations, today is National Beer Day. So you get a free 18 pack of beer or a 12 pack of seltzers. It's like, holy shit, like, must be my lucky day. I had it delivered right now. I'm going to get a free 12 pack one. It's like, shit, that's pretty cool, So this lightens up my day. I just got a huge bunch of omnibuses. Plus, I got a free freaking 12 pack of these drinks. Oh, no, I'm not sure it was a 12 pack or a six pack. I want to say it was a 12 pack. All right, let's get to the next book. This one was kind of tricky. The whole operation on it getting here was the Dr. Aphra. I got this one, the freaking butt ugly cover. Horrible cover. The back of it. I like the back cover a lot more. That one was pretty sick. And the spine, I like the spine as well. It's not regular basic font. It's got some style to it. It doesn't say volume 1, so I'm guessing there won't be a second one. Not sure. Never read this material. It's completely new to me. I do want to follow some Star Wars. I swear to you, bullshit you not, I ordered the other cover and they sent me this one. I was like, I kind of want to complain, but I was like, the fact that they sent me this one tells me they no longer have the other cover. I saw they had no more copies, so I was like, fuck it, just roll with this one, roll with the punches. Sometimes you gotta pick when to fight your battles, when not. If it's not a big deal, don't build up a lot of negative energy towards shit unless it's something like where you're like, oh hell no, I ordered this limited edition shit. Yeah, so this book contains Dr. Aphra issues 1 through 40, so that's 40 issues right there, right off the bat. Plus, it has like 6 Darth Vader issues and 6 Star Wars issues. So it's connected to the other ongoing runs that were going on at the time, right? So I know nothing about Dr. Aphra. I'm just going completely blind on this book. I just connected to Star Wars, right? So that's why I bought it. I know it's gonna somehow connect to everything else. It's in the same universe. If not, if it was, let me put it like this: if it was just called Dr. Aphra, it didn't have the Star Wars attached to it, I wouldn't have bothered buying it. So because I don't know anything about it, right? So that's the big reason why I picked it up. I go, I'm gonna have to need to know what's going on with these other characters. But I do hear a lot of positive things about it. I hear it's good, so I'm hopeful for that. I haven't really heard any negative reviews about it, so that's good. Once I get into a series like a Star Wars or X-Men, even if it's good or bad, I'm gonna buy it because I want to know everything that happens in between in the other titles, right? That's just the way I am. Kind of like that completionist mentality. Like, well, what was Cyclops up to? What was Havoc up to? Like, I'm gonna need to buy X Factor. I'm gonna need to buy this because I want to know what the other characters were doing. Same with Star Wars. I'm not as invested in Star Wars. They can maybe flip some stuff around, and I won't care as much. When it's X-Men, sometimes it can be annoying at first. It's like, oh, you change this, you change that. Like, depending on the change itself. If it's too big a change, I'll have a knee-jerk reaction like a lot of us do. Cause like we've invested so much time in these characters. You don't want them see them change overnight, right? And slap some respect on these characters that we've been following. You want to change stuff about them, do it correctly. Do it in a way where it doesn't even have to be a big Marvel event, but make it a process, right? Where it's an ongoing story and you see a slow development, like in real life, bro. When we change as people, we don't change overnight. That's very rare. We change over time. I've never been like offended by it, but I have been guilty of giving an immediate reaction when it's a big change. It's like, what the fuck? What are they doing here? Give it time, but also these guys have to, just how we gotta respect the writers. Give it time. Let's see where they're going with this. The writers have to respect us as readers too, and they gotta ease into shit. Like, don't just change it from one issue to the next. And that's how I am with some of these X-Men characters. I grew up with that as a kid. That's probably the series I'm the most familiar with as far as comics. I've probably read about maybe I want to say somewhere around 250 issues of X-Men. There's no other series I've read. I know that's there. That's nothing compared to some of you readers there that have been reading 20, 30 years. You're like, 200 issues, that's it. But for me, that's kind of a lot. And no other series even comes close. Any other series, Batman, other characters, I've maybe read 50 issues, 30 issues. Never read it, and nothing even close to 250 issues like I have with X-Men. But I know X-Men has like, I don't know, 1,000 issues already. If we count all the reboots and everything else. But that's the one I am the most familiar with, so it's the one I'm more invested in. Brings me to the next book I got here. It's X-Men by Jim Lee, Volume 1. Now, this book is called X-Men, Jim Lee X-Men, right, Volume 1. It collects issues 244 to 269. So we get the first Jubilee, we get the first Gambit. But these are not, it's not a Jim Lee book. It has maybe like 6 issues of Jim Lee. This is a Mark Silvestri book. Now, Mark Silvestri, he has some real nice art. He made the characters look very sexy, the women characters. And the man characters still look manly. Not like once Jim Lee got a hold of it, he made the guys look very sexy, and he made the women look very sexy, right? Everybody was a freaking supermodel once he was on it, because, his artwork's so pretty, homie. That shit is pretty. But it's all good. I ain't mad at him. I love him. He's one of my favorite artists. He's probably the biggest reason why I got into comics was probably Jim Lee and the 90s X-Men cartoons. It's about 8 at the time when those cartoons came out. And I became immediately a big fan of X-Men. I was vaguely familiar with them, not too much. And the cartoons, everybody was a big X-Men fan. I was like 8, I have friends, big brothers that were 20, that were into comic books, and they were into X-Men. X-Men made reading comics cool, then comics just blew up in the 90s in general. Because I hear this stigma that, you were frowned upon, you were a nerd if you read comics. That may have been the case in the 70s, I don't know, in the 80s maybe. But in the 90s, I know for a fact that was not the case. Comics were very mainstream. If you read them, you were cool. You weren't a nerd. You weren't an outcast. And I know you could say, well, you were 8, you were 9 years old. So if kids read comics, they were nerds because it's like a toy, right? Like kids are supposed to read it. You were a nerd if you were an adult reading them. And I was not an adult yet. But I have to debunk that whole theory because I had friends, their older brothers, they were already, teenagers or a little older, and they were into comics, and they were not like nerdy, right? So they at that time they were very mainstream. You had an X-Men arcade. When X-Men for Genesis came out, man, the world went crazy. I mean, people went nuts over that shit. Like, oh damn, have you seen the commercial? X-Men is getting a video game for Sega, and at that time, video games were starting to become cool with the older crowd, with adults, right? Because before that, Nintendo. Video games were for kids. And when Sega Genesis came out, it was starting to be geared towards teenagers. Like, we're chopping heads off on Mortal Kombat, we're showing blood, and we're doing shit a little more adult-like, right? So I grew up in an era where everything that used to be outcast was not anymore, right? Much like what's going on right now. All that stuff is cool. Adults are watching superhero Disney movies. Teenagers are watching them, and it's not lame. All right, that brings me to my next book. Is Jim Lee X-Men Volume 2. So yeah, I restocked up on all these books. Love this cover. Love it, love it, love it. Now this contains issues 63 to 70 of X Factor, X-Men issues 273 to 80, and the new X-Men 1 through 9. So at this time, this was a big deal in comics. We had rebooted X-Men. It restarted at number 1, right? Perfect time for kids to jump into comics because you were like, oh, issue 300, like what's been going on the other 299 issues. Here you feel like you're you're being included right in the beginning of things from the ground floor, right? Ground up. So that was very cool. Had amazing art by Jim Lee. So we were all like, oh yeah, issue 1, and oh, look at the artist, man, he's the shit, right? Um, you know what? Before I finish this story, this cover is not even the cover I ordered. Even though I really love this cover, so I'm not even mad at it. I'm not even tripping. But that's not the cover I ordered. I ordered the other cover so it could match my volume 1. So yeah, I just really noticed that right now. I was like, you know what? That's not even. Anyways, so yeah, X-Men at that time was big because they had rebooted, and we had Jim Leonard, and we had the new cartoon coming out. So it was like a collage of things just coming together beautifully. Before X-Men, I used to read some Spider-Man, some what was the guy, Peter Porker, I believe, and some Captain America. Because you know, when I was like 5, 6, we used to go to the library. Like my mom would take us to a library, because back then libraries you could rent movies for free, you could rent magazines for free, books for free. So we used to get the old VHSs. I'm sure we used to go rent movies for free. That's why we had a library card, because my mom used to love renting movies, and that way we didn't have to spend money, right? And we used to go because they had at the libraries they had single issues, big boxes of single issues. You could rent or you could read there. So while she'd be looking through the movies and stuff, we would sit down and read. And I always gravitated towards Captain America. At that time, I didn't know who was the writer or any of that. But now, as I'm an adult, I remember some of the issues, and I know it was Grunwell's run back in the like late '80s, right? So it was because I remember there was U.S. Agent. I go, what was the U.S. Agent stuff when I got back into reading right now as an adult, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I was like, what was the U.S. Agent stuff of Captain America? I go, I remember I read that back when I was like 5. So it was the Grunwell stuff. I went back and read it as an adult, and it's still solid. I still really enjoyed it. I didn't really remember any of the actual issues. I was like, I don't remember any of these specific issues, but I remember they had that character in them fighting Captain America. So, anyways, I used to read some of that in Spider-Man, and then when X-Men came out and it just blew up once I was like 8 or 9, I no longer was reading them at the library. Like I was hitting the comic shops and I was buying the books, right? So they were like $1.25, I believe. I think it was $1.25. The only books I bought that were like the current books that were out were X-Men. But outside of that, I used to hunt through the back issues because you know your parents give you like $2, $3. You're 6, you're 7. I'll go to the back issues where they were a quarter. I was like, I got $2. I could buy 8 quarter books or one of like the new books, right? Or 2 of them. So I was digging through them long boxes, homie. I was just digging through them looking for X-Men books, trying to find a run of issues, right? Of issue like 2010, 2011, 2012, like issues that went in a row. With my $2, whatever, I bought like 8 books. I thought I hit gold when I found out a big pattern in a row. I was like, hell yeah. So I read, even though I grew up in the 90s as a kid, I read a lot of the 80s stuff because I was buying a lot of the back issues. So I was kind of getting somewhat familiar with the X-Men characters. And I remember before I started buying the X-Men comics, I used to see Wolverine a lot. Like they were making a big push for him in the late 80s. And when I used to see him and I'll say X-Men, then they had this Nintendo video game called X-Men and they had Wolverine like jumping like that in the cover. I thought that was Wolverine was X-Men because I would say X-Men. I'm like 5 years old at that time. I'm like, oh, that's X-Men. That's the guy X-Men. Later, once you 2, 3 years later, as I got a little older and I started buying the books, I was like, no, this guy's Wolverine. The team is X-Men. I didn't know that at the time though, so I thought that was kind of funny. But that X-Men Volume 2 by Jim Lee, that's super nostalgic for me. We had the introduction to Omega Red, then it led to the Fatal Attraction stuff. That's kind of where I hopped off on comics as a kid. I read really like the ongoings as they came out, from the Jim Lee Volume 1 X-Men all the way to the Fatal Attractions. And you grow out of that, you hit high school, you're spending money on other things. So then I never went back to comics. I never went back to comics till 5 years ago as an adult already. But when I went back and read some of this or flipped through the pages, I'm like, man, I remember this issue with Omega Red. Those I clearly remember. I was like, I remember this story arc. Some of the story arcs I remember, some I don't. But yeah, so that one's the one I was probably the most excited to get back because I was real excited when I first got it. That's what got me into omnibuses. That's the first omnibus I bought a few years back. And then I was like, wow, I felt they were expensive at that time. I was like, wow, I'm paying like $80 for this. Then once I got it, I was like, wow, like the quality on this and the extra bonus material. I was like, I felt I got every penny's worth. I was like, hell yeah, I got $80. I go, it's totally worth it. So that's when I just started buying more omnibuses, and I kind of just stopped buying singles and I stopped following current comics, right? And I went a hardcover route because I was like, wow, these are real nice. Back in the days, the only hardcovers you had were the Marvel Masterworks, and those were real, but you didn't have these omnis and trades. Like if you wanted a book, like an old key issue that you could buy it on a trade in a hardcover now, you have to go hunt that book down and you have to pay like $80 for it. And so it was crazy back then. But back then we did have comic stores every 2 blocks, not like now, right? Or you had to hunt through them boxes to get those issues because they didn't just have them in trades. Like it's so convenient the way we have it now. Um, I think there was a certain point when they started reprinting the big key issues, the ones that they knew they were pretty expensive. People can't finish their runs because those books cost a lot. They would reprint those and sell them to you for like $1, right? A reprint. And I remember the key collectors, just frowned upon if you were an adult buying reprints, like, oh, how gross. Oh. You know what? I've been rambling on a little bit, and I just noticed this video is running a lot longer than I thought, and I still have quite a few books to get through. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end this video here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Go ahead and hit that like button. Help show some support for the channel, and hopefully you stay tuned for the second part. Right now I'm gonna end this video here, and I'm gonna do the second part so that it won't be one long video, right? So thanks for taking some time out of the day to check this video out, and hopefully stay tuned for the next one.